I'm the one with a foreign accent. I'm from New Zealand, and my wife is English. Once, in a grocery store in Sheffield, England, I asked for eggs. They didn't understand me and said, "What?" I repeated, "Eggs." Still confused, they asked what they were, so I clarified, "They come from hens." They laughed and said, "Oh, you mean eggs." Apparently they thought I was saying "eggs," which left me completely baffled. I don't have a foreign partner, so I hope it's all right if I jump in. I used to work with a woman from Israel who pronounced cucumber as cockumber. Being relatively young at the time, we couldn't help but laugh. My wife is Danish and once sent an email inviting her coworkers for drinks and nipples. I worked in a kitchen with a foreign lady who couldn't recall the English word for chicken. She pointed at some eggs and asked, "Which fridge do we keep their mother in?" A close Spanish friend of mine was practicing English idioms and wanted to talk about my flatmate, who keeps repeating the same mistakes. Instead of saying, "A leopard can't change its spots," she declared, "You know what they say, you cannot remove the dots from the large cat?" We were absolutely in stitches over it. My wife is from Indonesia, and she learned the word bollocks, but she uses it as an insult in the singular. For example, she'll call someone a b-jack. It's become my favorite insult now. Years ago, a Spanish friend couldn't remember the word for garage, so she referred to it as the place where you take your car for a drink. Even 20 years later, I still love that description. My Moroccan husband often mixes up too many and a lot of, which leads to embarrassing moments when we see large groups of women or Asians. My grandmother, who wasn't originally from this country, used to ask if her outfit looked all right because she didn't want to resemble mutton dressed as chicken. My Hungarian girlfriend has excellent English but occasionally stumbles on uncommon phrases, especially in the bedroom. Once she confidently said, "I'm your dirty little slug." My Greek partner couldn't think of the word infinity, so she told me she loved me until the snoozy 8. Years ago, a Spanish coworker of mine would replace "you've really opened a can of worms" with "you've really opened a tin of beans." I still find it hilarious. They don't use the phrase anymore, but they used to say emotional backpack instead of emotional baggage, which was such a delightful term. My girlfriend is Romanian. On our third date, she invited me over to her house. While we were discussing shopping, she told me she had chicken tights. I looked puzzled, and she repeated, "I have chicken tights," while rubbing her legs. I tried to picture what kind of clothing this might be and replied, "That doesn't help." Then she opened the fridge and revealed some chicken thighs. That became our first shared joke. She often says things that I don't correct because they're charming, even though they're slightly off or mispronounced. I adore the way she says daffodils, rhyming with crocodiles, bubbles instead of bulbs, casserole, referring to any Tupperware-like container, jardinière, meaning any flower pot, salmon, with a pronounced L, schedel, for schedule, and many other words. She also occasionally mixes up he and she, but usually only when she's tired or really excited. Meanwhile, I've been learning Romanian for 3 years, and she bursts into laughter every time I attempt a conversation. I suspect I sound like the policeman from Allo Allo. One of my closest friends is Spanish and has lived in Spain her entire life, but she's fluent in English. When we first got to know each other, she would say genre instead of gender, asking questions like, "What genre are they?" To which I'd respond, science fiction thriller? An Eastern European friend once described how her dog got anxious when there were too many people around while she took him to the supermarket. She started her story with, "When I park him outside Tesco." Technically, she wasn't wrong. My wife is from Taiwan. The first time she heard Bob Marley's Jamming, she thought it was a song about chow mein. Even now we still sing, and I hope you like chow mein too. My Polish wife speaks nearly perfect English, but has a few persistent quirks she can't seem to shake. For example, she says tamrak instead of tarmac, many for menu, and mixes up seat and sit, leading to phrases like take a sit or we were seating. This isn't about a spouse, but my Croatian granddad, Dida, never quite grasped the phrase telling someone off. He interpreted it literally, so if he saw kids misbehaving, like vandalizing something, he'd run over yelling, "Off, off, off." He genuinely believed saying off was equivalent to scolding them. Rip Dida, you were one of a kind. My French friend mistakenly says lonely child when she means only child. I've never corrected her. Alice on the Wonderwall today is going to be the day that I'm falling down a rabbit hole. A lovely Polish woman I worked with once called a broom a sweepy. I still smile every time I think about it. One of my dearest friends is Bulgarian, and instead of saying, "You're cracking me up," she says, "You are cracking me." I'll never correct her because it's just too adorable. My Japanese husband once forgot the term fabric softener and instead called it flavored soap. Edit. I can't believe I forgot the best one. He was trying to remember the word for walkie-talkie and went through a series of hilarious guesses like talkie-walkie, walkie-wiki, walkie-walkie, and even wiki-wiki. I still tease my French wife about the time she called a cheese grater a cheese raper. It's an unfortunate mispronunciation of the French word râper, meaning to grate. My Czech sister-in-law refers to the Silence of the Lambs as don't speaking of small sheep. One of my favorite things is when my Japanese wife tries to say hippopotamus, but doesn't know when to stop. So we end up with hippopo, popo, pop, pop, pop. My wife is Vietnamese, and because pronouns are used differently in her language, she treats he and she as interchangeable, which keeps me on my toes. On the other hand, she finds it hilarious when I try to order beetroot juice in Vietnamese. We live there now. The tonal language trips me up, and I end up pronouncing beetroot juice as black penis.